Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to my channel. When I started this channel just a few short weeks ago, I posted on my Instagram and in the caption I asked people to tell me what they might want to hear me talk about in a future video. And I got a few questions there, and then I posted in my stories recently and asked for more questions. So in today's video, I'm going to tackle some of the questions that I had. And in the process, I'm going to show you some sweaters I've knit, some of my favorite yarns, and a book I love. And we're just going to talk about knitting. So stick around and we'll get to it. Alright, before we get to the first question, I just want to remind you, if you're enjoying this video and you're getting something out of it, definitely be sure to hit the like button down below. And if you want to see future knitting related videos from me, be sure to hit the subscribe button and hit the little bell next to it if you want notifications. So I think the best question to start with was, how old was I when I started crafting? This is sort of a hard one for me to answer. I think the age that I became super serious about it was 33 just last year, or was really in 2018 whenever I started crocheting. And then knitting came along and was an even bigger obsession right away than crocheting. That was the first time I really, as an adult, devoted massive amounts of time to it and a lot of energy into learning and getting better. I'm super happy that I did it because I've gotten a lot out of this and I can't wait to just keep growing and learning and getting better. Next up, somebody asked me what my favorite thing that I've ever knit is and what my least favorite thing that I have ever knit. And I can tell you the category of least favorite things, and that is scarves. I don't know why. I wear scarves all the time living in Chicago, but I just don't want to knit them. They just seem like they're going to take so long and it's not going to be like impressive whenever I'm done, even though I've knit, I would say 2 scarves. One's a wrap and I love them, and one of them is my most worn item, but I just don't ever feel inspired to knit a scarf the way that I get whenever I see a hat pattern I like or a sweater pattern that I like, which leads to my favorite types of things to knit. I really like quick projects, and I think when I first started knitting, all I wanted to knit was something that was quick, and I feel like I probably should keep knitting quick things because I have more yarn than I could ever knit. I think I probably will die before I knit all my yarn, especially because I'm going to keep acquiring more. But I love to knit larger projects now, such as sweaters. I love knitting a good sweater, and then recently I got kind of burnt out on sweaters and then I switched to socks, which for me take a little bit more time as well, and I was overcommitting myself on sock projects at one time, and now I'm back to sweaters with my Cozy Classic Raglan. So I think my least favorite is scarves and my favorite is probably tied between sweaters and socks. I have a couple of my favorite sweaters that I knit. It'll lead me into my next question I got, which is, what's your favorite or go-to men's sweater pattern? And that's a really hard question for me to answer because I think my favorite pattern is always my most recently completed successful pattern, and my least favorite is my most recently completed pattern that has some sort of flaw that I can't get past. But I have recently knit 2 sweaters that I absolutely love. One of them was maybe a couple sweaters ago, and one was my last sweater that I finished. And if you follow me on Instagram at Drowning in Yarn, you will have seen these, but I'll show them to you now just in case. And also, I'm about to expose myself because I post these things on Instagram and they look complete, but they're not. I leave my ends completely unwoven in until I'm ready to wear it out into the world. And I finished both of these when it was getting warmer, so I haven't actually worn them out. So they're done. So the first one is my most recently completed sweater, and it is the Leelanau. It is your basic raglan sweater with a lice stitch. It is knit bottom up. It's my first bottom up sweater, and I absolutely did not love that process. It scared me. I was afraid I wasn't going to get the length right. I was afraid I wasn't going to get the fit right. I always taper my sweaters as I go down the body, and I had to increase as I went up so that the bottom was a little bit smaller, and it increased as I went along while still maintaining the lice stitch. And I got to the underarms, joined the sleeves because I did knit the sleeves first. I joined the sleeves and then I set it aside out of fear because the raglan shaping on this was decreases and I had only ever done increases. Once I picked it back up and started knitting it, I was so mad at myself for being afraid because it was so easy. I did have to do a little bit of math because I always have to knit a little bit of extra yoke depth. So on this one, I went through the pattern, figured out exactly how many rows that I had left to knit. I figured out what my row gauge was just by measuring that. And I calculated exactly how many rows I would need to add before doing the decreases to make sure that my yoke depth came out to my final measurement, which tends to be around 11 inches. That was, I think, part of what scared me. But then once I just started doing it and realized that that was kind of the process that I needed to go through to make sure that it fit, it was easy. And I was so mad at myself for not just diving into it, because from that point on, it was very quick and the sweater fits like a damn dream. I love it. So I think this is an excellent pattern. I was inspired to knit this by Laura McDougall. She knit it, I don't actually know when, but she said it is just her go-to pattern. And I saw hers, it is so cute, and I needed one for myself. So I knit this one in Brooklyn Tweed Arbor, and the contrast color for the little light stitch pattern throughout the sweater is Prairie Spun DK from Brown Sheep Co. in the color Honeycomb. And the Brooklyn Tweed Arbor is in the color Spruce, which is, you will see later in this program, so stick around. I love this sweater. I think the colors were very successful and the fit was very successful. So my next favorite is the Montrealer sweater, which is a hoodie. It's from Designs by Dells. I knit this sweater in woolstock worsted. It is also a basic raglan shaping, started from a provisional cast on. It was super fun to knit. It was deceptively simple. The impact of the sweater is high for something that is so simple to knit. So that one is one of my favorites. But like I said, I don't have a go-to pattern. I think that it might be this cozy classic raglan in the end, but it might be too soon to say that. I'm just really enjoying it, and I think the pattern is just so well written. So the most asked question that I got was, what are my favorite yarns, or what is my favorite fiber? And this question piggybacks perfectly off of the last question. Both of those sweaters are knit in two of my favorite yarns. I love Brooklyn Tweed Arbor, which is what I knit my Leela now in. This yarn is a DK weight yarn. It's so soft. It's not scratchy at all. The colors are absolutely beautiful. And the Leela now that I knit was actually a worsted weight pattern. I knit it in this DK and it worked out perfectly. These dark greens are some of my favorite. I actually have to be kind of careful to not just knit everything in these dark earthy greens, because I have a lot of clothes in these colors. But I saw this color and I just knew I had to have it, and especially in Arbor, because it holds up really well, it doesn't really pill, and it makes just a beautiful, squishy, like luxurious feeling fabric. So I like all the other Brooklyn Tweed yarns as well, but Arbor is my favorite. I love DK weight. And then my Montrealer was knit in woolstock worsted, which is actually, I think, more of a DK weight, but this is a skein of the yarn that I had left over from my sweater. I actually bought far too much in these 150 gram skeins, which was a steal. The wool is so woolly. I love like woolly wools, but it's not scratchy at all. It's very soft with stitches that are really well defined. It's a very good deal for the yarn. It feels amazing. So I love this yarn and I can't wait to work with it in another project. I just love to try yarns. So even some of my favorite yarns end up showing up in only a few of my projects, because I just get so excited to try new yarns, which you'll see in a minute, because some of my favorite fibers are things that I haven't even knit with. But I have a couple more that I love that I have knit with to show you. One of my absolute favorite fingering weight yarns is Finch by Quince & Co. Finch is just an amazing fingering weight yarn. It is very well priced. You get a decent amount of yardage. It comes in a lot of colors, and I just think it's a great yarn that makes a really lovely fabric. My favorite thing I've made with it so far is a Roku hat, which is one of my go-to hat patterns. I've knit it 4 times, and I've knit 2 for gifts. They knit up quickly and they're absolutely beautiful. Let me show you the one that I've made now in 2 other colors of Finch. So this is the Roku hat that I made in Finch. It's just your basic ribbed hat, and where you get your money's worth out of the pattern is in these decreases. The decreases are so cleverly done that they create just the most finished looking top of a hat that I've seen, that I've knit anyway. It really just looks like it's got that like handmade versus homemade thing going on because of how clean the decreases are. It just is such an amazing hat. It is written for worsted weight yarn. However, I have discovered that my favorite way to knit it is by holding 2 fingering weights together. So this one was knit with 2 strands of Finch held together for a marled look. You'll see that it is marled with a mustard color and sort of almost a walnut color that comes off a little gray. Now to do this, I just used the smaller needle that was called for in the pattern, because you start with the smaller needle and then you go up the needle size for the rest of the hat. I just stuck with the smaller one, and it created a really dense hat that has not stretched out. it still fits my head like the day that I made it and doesn't ride up when I wear it, which I found that a lot of the hats I knit have ridden up some. So I just have to keep tugging them down. So I just like this one, just that little extra, because it doesn't do that and it fits so well. One more yarn that I really love and I've knit with is the new cotton and wool yarn from Brooklyn Tweed called Dapple. It is so soft and it comes in really beautiful kind of like earthier tones, and I just love it. I knit one of my new favorite hat patterns out of it. I absolutely love a scrappy project, and this one was just perfect. It is the Midnight Lights hat by Tiff Nealon. As you can see, it's got this really gorgeous fade going on. The Dapple is this brim color. The best thing about this hat is it's reversible. So if you flip it inside out, you have a much more subtle look, and you really see this dapple, which is so soft, and you still get that gorgeous fade kind of going on from the contrast colors. It is a twisted rib with slip stitch pattern, the whole hat. It also has really clean decreases that create that very nice crown, and I just highly recommend both the Midnight Lights hat and the Dapple yarn. So I'm super excited to wear this hat this winter. The contrast colors in this, by the way, are leftover Malabrigo socks that are from Sock Projects. One of them was from Brian, I think this top one, and then these are both from some socks that I made. So you should buy this pattern and knit this, it's amazing. So now I'm gonna get into two yarns that I'm so excited to knit with, but I have not yet used. The first one is Germantown from Kilborn Woolens. From everything that I've read, it's just a really great workhorse wool, and you get excellent yardage and the price is right, and the colors are really fun. So I can't wait to try this. I just got these two skeins. I figured I would knit maybe a hat or something whenever the feeling strikes me, and I'll see how it goes, but I can't wait to try them. And the other favorite yarn that I have not used yet is actually from an indie dyer called Fiber for the People. The dyer's name is Taylor Earl, and she has a podcast and some yarn dyeing tip videos, which is how I found her whenever I decided that I was going to take on dyeing as a new hobby. I looked up her videos, and she teaches so much. It's very obvious that she loves what she does and she wants to share that, and I just found that super inspiring. And it didn't hurt that she dyes some of the most beautiful yarns I've ever seen, and she does amazing things with my color palette that I love in those earthier tones. So during a recent shop update, I splurged and I got some skeins. This one is your standard sock yarn with some nylon in it, and I will not lie to y'all, I thought I was ordering something else and accidentally clicked the button for this. And so it was a happy surprise when I got it, because I do love a bright sock, and I think she did something amazing with this neon green. It is so beautiful. There's so many colors going on in here. I can't wait to see what the socks that I knit out of this look like. I'm really happy I made that mistake because this is gorgeous. These two were super intentional. I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but I'm going to save them for the perfect thing because they're absolutely amazing. These are 100% superwash New Zealand Polworth, which is a new wool to me, so I need to look that up. They sort of feel to me like Blueface Leicester a little bit. They feel amazing, and these colors are just gorgeous. So I can't wait to see what I'm going to turn these into, but I just got to find the perfect thing because they're so good. And also in the package was a packet of what I can only assume is like her favorite tea, but I thought it was just such a nice touch. It doesn't surprise me because from her Instagram presence and her YouTube presence, I just feel like I would want her to be my best friend immediately, and that kind of confirmed it for me. So I highly recommend you go check out her yarns. They're gorgeous. Somebody did ask me who inspires me in the knitting world and why. I think somebody who inspires me a lot is Clara Parks. She's an author who writes a lot about yarn. She has written tons of reviews of yarn. She's appeared on TV reviewing yarn, and she's written a few books that are sort of memoir-ish, I guess, about just her yarn travels and people that she's met. And I've read them all. Her most recent book was Vanishing Fleece. That was about a bale of wool that she bought and decided she was going to turn it into yarn just to kind of get to know the process, since she is such a yarn person. That way she knew, from sheep to skein what that was like. And it was really interesting. I learned a lot about the American wool industry, and I think she's super interesting. Now, I have read most of her books. Either I borrowed one or two from the library, and then I own some in ebook form. One of the books that I actually have a physical copy of is the Knitter's Book of Yarn. She also has a Knitter's Book of Wool that I intend to pick up, but I got this for Christmas. There are a lot of patterns in here. There's also a lot of information about different kinds of yarn and what it's best for and different kinds of wool. And so I love this as just kind of a resource, but I highly recommend you check out all her books. If you're really into wool and really into yarn, then you will find them super interesting. If you're not really into wool and not really into yarn, then what are you doing here? Just kidding, but you should check them out. Now, somebody also asked me, do I have a yarn room? They said that people love tours of yarn rooms. And as you can see, I live in a very small place, which is changing soon. I am moving, but I'm not gonna have excess rooms then either. So I'll show you where I keep my yarn, but there's nothing impressive about it. But to do that, I'm gonna have to take you on a little tour with me. So let me just take you off the tripod and show you where I keep it. Okay, so I pulled a bunch of stuff out to show you all, so this isn't where it usually is, but here's my yarn room. This bag. And it usually goes under my couch. I have two under my couch. I have a tub in a storage closet in the back, but that's most of my yarns that I bought whenever I was doing crochet, which was a lot of acrylic yarns that I keep around because I have knit baby sweaters in acrylic, and I think it'd be great whenever I decide to knit my dog a sweater. Also, just in case I get the urge to do amigurumi. And then I also have another one of these big storage containers under my bed. They're almost full, so I'm gonna have to buy some more. They're super cheap from Amazon, and they've been really useful. Living in kind of a smaller place, it's been the best way for me to store my yarn and not feel overwhelmed by it all. And it's still really easy to pull out whenever I wanna go through. So that's my yarn room. It's not that impressive. All right, thanks for coming along with me for that. The next one I have, there's a lot of questions in here, so I may not get to them all. I got asked what are my favorite and least favorite types of projects to knit. My knitting queue, my most worn items. I'm looking at my iPad now because this one's kind of long. My most worn items, my favorite yarns, which I told y'all, my favorite indie dyers, which I told y'all, and y'all already know I love my hand-dyed yarns from Knit One, my local yarn store. They're all amazing, so I'd add them in there as well. My favorite knitters I follow on Instagram. So I'm gonna start with my most worn items. I have told you my favorite and least favorite types of projects to knit. I love sweaters and I don't love scarves. But since I don't love scarves, it may surprise you that one of my most worn items and one of my favorite things I've ever knit is a scarf. It's a Purl Soho pattern. It's just a fisherman's rib scarf, super simple to knit, and it's knit in their Big Good wool, which is like a steal. I went to New York for a wedding, and so we popped into Purl Soho at the end of last year, and they had a sample of this. I tried it on and immediately knew I was gonna make it. So I bought the yarn and I started as soon as I got home. I knit this whole scarf in a week while I watched The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I still have only seen the first season, so don't spoil it for me. It just goes with anything and it keeps me super, super warm. So I highly recommend this pattern. I have two more projects to show you for my most worn items. The second to last are these socks. They're just basic ribbed socks from the book Custom Socks by Kate Atherley. Super simple 3x1 rib. And these are knit in Malabrigo sock, which doesn't have any nylon. So I just used it for kind of the main color. And then for the contrasting heel toe, where I thought I needed maybe a little bit extra strength, I used a Madeline Tosh yarn with some nylon that I got on sale on their website right before they sold to Jimmy Bean's wool. But I thought it worked really well with this fun confetti kind of wool that reminds me of sprinkles, and I love sprinkles on my ice cream and cake and stuff, so I thought these were perfect for me, and I love these socks. They're one of my favorite pairs I've ever knit. And then the last thing on my most worn list is my Night Shift from Andrea Mowry. So this shawl, I wear it more just kind of as a scarf. It goes really nicely in my jacket, so kept me warm all winter. I knit this out of Painted Sky for the color shifting yarns. There are 6 colors in here, and then for the solid or semi-solid in this case, I use Malabrigo Rios. The pattern does call for all skeins of Spin Cycle, but I couldn't justify the cost at the time, not knowing even if I was gonna wear it because I was kind of hesitant to knit a shawl in the first place. And I love this thing. It just goes really, really well under a coat. You can imagine, you know, I just zip the coat up here and then it just keeps me all bundled up and warm, and it's beautiful. I love this thing and I'm so happy I knit it. Yeah, so those are really my most worn items and some of my favorite patterns. I definitely recommend you check them all out. So the last 2 questions in here that I haven't already answered are what's in my knitting queue, and that's an extremely hard question to answer. If you go on Ravelry, my knitting queue has a ton of stuff that I probably will never actually get to because I just kind of add things there to remind myself of them. I have no idea what's coming next for me. I have a few sweater quantities of yarn that I bought since the pandemic started, and I need to figure out what to do with them. I don't really know, so I can't say that they're in my queue per se. There's no pattern, but those yarns are in my queue to be knit. And then my last one is my fave knitters that I follow. That's a really hard question because there are so many inspiring people. I love all the things that I see from Tiff Neal and Hand Knits, who designed the Midnight Lights hat. I've been super inspired recently by a person on Instagram that goes by Cold Brew Knits. He is obsessed with the Cozy Classic Raglan and has knit a couple or a few, and they are beautiful, and inspired me to go ahead and knit the sweater using the mohair, which kind of scared me. And I'm really glad that he made the post that he did that gave me the courage to do that, because I'm so happy with it. I mean, you've heard me talk about it so much at this point, and you're going to hear me talk about it more because the thing is amazing, and I'm really happy with the yarn choices that I made. I have him to thank for that, so he's one of my favorite Instagram knitters right now. I also really enjoy following Hey Brownberry. She just seems like a super inspirational kind of person, and she's kind of an all-around maker, and she just makes beautiful things and just has this presence about her Instagram that just gives me happy vibes. She also, I've seen a couple socks from her that are gorgeous, and so I really enjoy her Instagram. And Summerly Knits also has a billion beautiful socks that I love to look at, so she'd be one as well. And I think that's the last question. So thanks for sticking around and hearing me answer these questions and kind of ramble a little bit. It's been fun, and if you enjoyed this and if you got some value out of this, please go ahead and hit the like button down below and hit the subscribe button. Doing those things really helps me out. And if you want to tag me on Instagram when you're watching my videos, put me in your stories or anything like that, I'd love to know. And tag me in any projects that you do that are super awesome, because I'd love to see them. And I think that's all I have. So I'll see y'all later.